Hi everyone, I'm Dhruv and we are here for the intro to UI UX concepts with React.js. So let's get started. First of all, I'm the External Affairs, Marketing and Events Director at GDSC at University of Arizona. And today I'm going to be talking about UI UX, which is personally my favorite stuff to talk about. So um, yeah. First of all, for my past experience, I'm currently a sophomore, but in India, I've worked as a freelance web developer, where I've designed websites for a few companies and a few clients here and there. And yep, I think that's about it. And we can just get started. All right. So any questions or anything anybody wants to say before we start? All right, then. Can we have Suvrat? Sorry about the camera. It just got fixed. So we have Suvrat here, which is part of our marketing team. He's going to say a few words about DSC. So Suvrat, you want to take the lead on that?
Hey everyone, my name is Suvrat and I'm the marketing lead here at the DSC. So I just wanted to briefly talk about our club as a whole. We're trying to get more regular with the event. So this is the event that we're hosting this month, and hopefully we have a couple more events from the in the next upcoming months. We have a hackathon coming soon, so I would like you guys to sign up for that as well. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys are kind of familiar with what we do here, and I don't see any new names. So yeah, welcome, and I hope you enjoy this workshop here.
Thanks a lot, Suvrat. All right, then we'll just get started. So let's first talk about what's UI UX. So as far as the full form goes, UI stands for user interface and UX stands for user experience. I like to think of UI UX as the link between a client and a seller that is mediated by a developer. So it's basically like a means to advertise or sell any objects, people, or information. It's how you just market yourself on the internet. But when we talk about UI UX, is it just appearance? Is it just the web design? Well, I don't think so, because when we talk about UI UX, let me compare it to something that I love. I love cooking a lot. So when we talk about food, when we eat food, is food just taste? I don't think so, because I think food is a mixture of like taste, smell, and what you see. It's a combination of multiple things. For me, UI UX is also the same. It's like a mixture of what you see, what you click on a website, what you hear, any sounds or any background music, and what your brain associates with what you have earlier seen before. So UI UX is not just appearance. And when we talk about it, it's also how you manage your code, your front end code. Uh, that's also super important for UI UX. We're going to cover some of the topics in the workshop today. So let's get started. So, okay. First, we'll talk about React.js. So before we go into React, there's a few things that I'm going to just talk about a little bit that are just basics of any website. So first, let's talk about DOM. That stands for Document Object Model. So DOM is basically an interface between programming language and designing. So it's what the machine reads and what you want the machine to do, what you want the website to look like. Essentially, DOM is like an interface between those two. So it's a cross-platform and language independent. So it doesn't depend what kind of backend you're using. You could use Python, you could use JavaScript. It doesn't matter. DOM is just an interface between the what you look at when you see a website and what you code when you're creating a website. All right. So it represents, so DOM essentially represents design objects, colors, and just objects, and the shapes and everything that you see as nodes in a tree. So if you have taken previous programming classes, you must have learned about trees and how they have nodes. So DOM essentially does the same thing. It's like a tree which has a root node, and it has several other nodes which and it treats them like objects. That's how a website is basically built. And after DOM, there's a particular thing, interestingly, in React that's called state, which is an object. Again, it's an object. So most of it is based on object-oriented programming, because it really helps us to, just compile things easily. So state is an object that represents information about current situation of an object. So for example, if you, there's a lot of websites out there where you see changes like polls and counters where things get updated regularly. So they usually, what they do is they have a lot of complex stuff going on behind them with the API fetching data and everything. But there's a state to those counters which gets updated every time React calls the state. So that's pretty interesting. So it's useful because it helps control information real time. And yeah, that's about state. Okay, so let's talk about React.js. React.js uses virtual DOM. Now, virtual DOM is a concept that's, I think it's only in React. It's a concept that they introduced to the world. It's a programming concept where an idea or virtual representation of a UI is kept in memory and synced with the real DOM by a library such as React DOM. So React has a library made for that. It's called React DOM. And this process is called reconciliation. So why is virtual DOM important? It's because it helps configure the state of objects, the state that we mentioned before. So we can adjust the state easily with a virtual DOM. And it's not to be confused with a shadow DOM, because shadow DOM is just another kind of tool that a lot of web browsers apply. It's a different thing, which is meant for encapsulation rather than this. So when we talk about VDOM and why we used React, it's basically because VDOM is much, much faster. So for choosing for manipulating things in a manually in a DOM, we have to make a lot of changes, and they're often very slow. So if you've learned about trees, you know how just adjusting one node can take a lot of time, because it needs that all other nodes are shifted, especially if you're not adding at the leaves, right? So that's why VDOM is just like an interface that updates the DOM for you without actually, taking that much time. So that's why React.js is super fast. And when we talk about the holy grail for React, so what's the one source where you can learn React properly? So there's like a ton of YouTube videos out there for any language: TypeScript, JavaScript, React.js, anything. There's going to be a lot of developers out there who are going to upload their own version. But I feel like with my little bit of experience of self-learning different languages, I feel that for any language, be it React or anything, the holy grail lies in the documentation, because it's the developers of the language itself that can clearly explain to you how a language works. So the documentation of React, well, you can just Google it and you should be able to have it. So it's pretty comprehensive. I've been through it once or twice, and it tells you a lot of stuff about how React works, what kind of concepts it's based on, and how you can use React to create super cool web applications and websites. All right, so for today, we're going to be taking a sample project that's going to be a simple to-do list, but that has a lot of UI UX concepts ingrained in it when I built it. So we will not build it from scratch because it's going to take a lot of time, but we'll cover on how you can use it, you can access it, and just get used to React with that. So yep, and that's about it for this slide. All right then. All right, so for our project, we're going to be needing several things which I can explain. So first of all, a Webpack. So Webpack is just a very powerful module bundler. Some of these things actually, because React updates very fast, so some of these things are a little depreciated. So that is fine. We're just learning it right now, so we don't need to get the most powerful tools right at the beginning. We can just use these tools that are still in use in a lot of websites. So Webpack is the first one. So it's, like I said, it's a powerful module bundler. Now, what are bundles? Bundles are basically JS files that group together stuff for a single file request. So every time your website makes a file request, it requests some kind of action. So for example, if you click on a link that goes to a new page, a module bundler is essentially going to take the JS files, the HTML, the CSS files, compile all of them together, and display the page for you. That's what a module bundler does essentially. And then we talk about Babel. So Babel is a transpiler. Transpiler, essentially what a transpiler does is that it takes source code written in one language and it produces the same code in another language. So it's this can be neat for if any of you want to take a Python project and convert it into a JS project. There's a couple of transpilers out there which you can just use to do that. And so when we're talking about web development, there's a lot of languages that are sometimes required. For example, HTML, CSS, XML, and all of these nasty words, that nasty languages that we have to just keep compiling one into each other. That's why we choose Babel. So it essentially helps us with that. Then we have JSX. JSX are used basically to add elegance. It's just a preprocessor that adds XML syntax to JS. It's not something that complicated. It's not even that essential, but React uses JSX, so we're going to use that. And then we have ESLint, which is like any code linter. It's used to find if there are any problems with your code as you write it in real time. So if you have any coding projects further up ahead in your course, in your courses, in your different courses, then you can just take a linter from some like VS Code. There's a lot of linters available, and just use it to find out any problems. It's not going to tell you it's not going to tell you every problem, but it's going to just highlight the problems that are obvious, so you can correct them as you write your code without having to compile it again and again. And then we talk about Prettier. That's a code formatter. It just makes your work look neat. It's just for people like me who are who have OCD and just want everything compiled properly. All right, and then of course we need React. So let's get started with it. And we're going to use React with node.js as the backend. So all right. So all right, then first we talk about node.js. So if you want any help with this, let me know in chat, as we're gonna download Node as we go. All right, so if you just Google Node, and let me find the link for you guys. So there you go. So if you go right here, you'll be able to download Node.js in your computer. And we essentially need that. So just let me know once you guys are done with that. We can start building our first React project after you've downloaded Node and everything else. All right. If if you're done downloading Node, or if you're currently downloading Node, just let me know in chat. If you can just drop a message, that would be cool. All right, awesome. Looks like a couple of you are happy to move on ahead. All right, then we'll get started. So it's essentially the installation process now. After you're done with that, Node has something called a Node Package Manager, which is NPM for short, and it helps you install a lot of libraries and packages that are created by other developers to enhance your website. So it has a lot of cool stuff. So we're going to use that to basically get started. So we want to create a new folder. Let me just put down the steps for you guys, actually, if anybody needs to do that. Okay. All right, there you go. So it's basically installing node.js using npm. Then we install create React app. That's something that's really useful for just starting out on React. It gives you a basic boilerplate. So it gives you a boilerplate to work with, and you can, go ahead, modify and create your own version of from that. You don't have to start from scratch, essentially. And we use create React app for that. And we just have a basic React app with a lot of stuff in it. So for our first program, what we're going to do is, do you want me to wait for you guys as you do all of this, or do you want me to move on ahead? Let me know. All right, perfect. So basically what we're going to do is in the source folder of our React project, we're gonna delete all of the files and include a new file called index.js. And in that, we're gonna put this piece of code right here. Hold up. All right, there you go. So this is just to get you started, so that I'm going to put all these instructions in a big message later on. So don't worry about it. If you can't do it right now, you can always do it later. And but this is basically what just a clean directory of first starting project from React looks like, just from basics. All right, so that's about it for this one. And we move on to the cooking. Okay. So for the actual project that we're going to look at, I've already built the project and I have a GitHub repository for that. So I'm not going to be taking any time to build it here because it's going to take a lot of time. So, and me explaining everything to you. So what we're going to do right now is basically, I'm going to show you the repository and go through the code and stuff and show you how it's, how it goes with UI UX and what concepts does it follow. And basically, I'm just leaving you guys to learn React by yourself because I believe in self-learning and having an individual experience of going through different methods, functions, and all of the other fun stuff by yourself can, that really helps you learn rather than me just telling you what to code and you just putting it down, right? So as for the GitHub repository that we're going to be talking about today, it's right here if you want. There you go. All of this is going to be in one single message at the end of the workshop, so don't worry about it. All right, so here's the GitHub repository. So what you can do is you can look at the GitHub repository, go through the code, and when you want to do React yourself, if you want to do it, you can try recreating the same thing by yourself. And you can use my code for reference as and when you like. So if you're new to GitHub, then I can go on and talk about that a little bit. So GitHub is basically a platform where you can, it's like a social media for coders. It's like where you can upload your code, and a lot of people can look at it if it's public. And it's like a version control platform, so you can store your code, have different versions of your code, upload it there. GitHub is a lot of fun, and you can just learn about it from the internet. So for cloning the website, you basically just go to the repository. On the right side, there's going to be a button in green that says code. And from there, you can either download the zip, or if you have terminal and git bash and all of that stuff, you can just clone your GitHub, my GitHub repository as you like. And I think that's about it for cloning. So let's get down to the fun stuff. The code. All right. So now I'm going to share my screen and show you what the code looks like. All right. Just let me know if you can see the Visual Studio I have opened up. Can you guys see the VS Code file that I've opened up? Sorry, the project that I've opened up in VS Code? All right, awesome. Okay, so let's get started. All right, then. When we talk about UI UX concepts, the first thing we have to talk about is the code and how we can, make the code better. So because we need to build scalable web applications. So the first thing that comes to mind is obviously if you have taken any coding classes, a lot of instructors must have mentioned this. It's going to be naming conventions. So how you name your functions and your methods, it's super important. So for example, this method right here, this function right here, it's in camel case, and these are functions that just speak about what they're actually doing. So wait, let me first show you what our project looks like. I'm really sorry about that. All right, so this is what our project looks like. It's a basic to-do list that, if you click on something, it's going to get deselected. And it's just for keeping track of, tasks that you want to do, and just a simple to-do list. All right, then. When we get back to code, there you go. All right, so all these things, toggle to-do, for example, helps us toggle between whether task is completed or not, and generate to-do list items. It's just gonna compile. It's just gonna build all the to-do items, to-do objects that we're gonna display in our to-do list. So all these different functions, we have to name them correctly. It's super important because as an app grows bigger and bigger, it gets big enough that we start losing track of a lot of things, and comments and names of different functions and variables are they help us keep track of what's going on in the project, because there's sometimes when the code gets so messy that you don't want to look back and try to figure out what's going on because it's all just messed up. So application namespacing involves choosing a correct name for the entire app, because everything inside the application is basically a child of your main app. So by giving it a unique name, we can create more specific style for that app. For example, in here, we have our child named, wait a second, it's right here. Yeah. So we have it named to-dos app. This right here is our child's name, and it's an app name for what we're building, because we're building a to-do app ultimately. So that's a perfectly good name. And in our index.js, we render the app and we get it by the element ID to-dos app. So that's going to be our app name. And first, initially, when you start making a project, you're going to see that this app name right here, this is going to be root, because it's essentially the root of our tree that we talked about, shadow, a virtual DOM, right? So it's going to be, so instead of root, we're naming it to-dos app, because we want it to have a name, and we can give it a unique name. We can create more specific styles for that instead of just app. And there's several naming conventions that people follow when it comes to building web apps and websites. So there's stuff like BEM, SUIT, CEM. So in this case, I've used a simpler version of CEM, but you can just look it up if you're interested on the internet. And here we have mostly camel casing and dash methods too. So that's about naming convention. The next most important thing when it comes to UI is going to be unidirectional styling. So that is one thing which I learned a bit late, but it's super important. So when we talk about unidirectional styling, it first of all, why is it important? It helps you avoid CSS conflicts. Now, what does it mean? It is simply not allowing child components to mutate or change parent components. For example, we have our app, right? And the parent component here is to-dos app. So if we go to to-dos list and we go to to-dos list.css, we see a bit of CSS here, and it's basically, so to-dos list here and to-dos list item, they are both children of to-dos app. So we're gonna just assign them their properties in CSS with this method. So what we go to to-dos app, and inside to-dos app, we find to-dos list. So if you've learned a bit of CSS, this is how you access the first element, which is going to be our parent container. And you give a space, and then you add another element to that. That's going to be to-dos list. So to-dos list here is a class. That's why it's represented by a period. So we're saying that to-dos app, inside to-dos app, there exists an element with the class to-dos list, and we're going to be modifying that. So that way it helps you. So it helps you not have CSS conflicts and things going like a small rectangle being huge and going out of the website, out of your screen. It helps you avoid that. So there's that. And when we go to app.css, which is basically the parent CSS class of all things, here we have specified a very specific CSS class that's going to be to-dos app.app.to-dos list, and then we specify the margin and max width. We do that here in the parent class because we want to avoid having, if we keep a super high margin, so it's going to avoid doing that if it's if it's unidirectional. So if it's unidirectional, it knows that it has a limit. It cannot go beyond that limit. So it's going to just get stuck there. So even if we put it like 1,000 pixel or something, it's not going to change anything because it's still inside its parent. And the parent specifies that the margin has to be 50 pixel, nothing more than that. So even if you specify it somewhere else below, it's not going to go above that. That's one good thing about unidirectional styling. And then we talk about just give me one sec. Okay. Extendable code, of course. Yep. So yep. All right. So extendable code essentially is modular code that can be repeated without having styling conflicts. So we style our components in a way that will not cause a problem for our application, even when a component is reused somewhere. So no matter how many times we reuse it, it has to be like it doesn't cause problems for other components. So for example, that's what I mentioned in unidirectional styling for a bit. Things like max width as 800 pixel. So we specify the max width of our to-dos list. That means that any class that we create that has class name of to-dos list, it's going to have a max width of 800 pixel and nothing more than that. So what it does is basically it helps you specify things so that if you include another to-dos list, you don't have to know that you don't have to specify what its width is going to be, what its margin is going to be. There are certain styles that are just specified in the parent app, and that's what makes it extensible. So modularity is something that's very important in code and while making the website, because there's going to be a lot of components. That's what React is basically based on. It's based on making components that are reusable and modular. So you can take up a component, put it somewhere else, replicate a component, put it beside it itself. That's what React basically does. So it helps you build your own HTML tags. That's one way to look at it. So you can specify those custom HTML tags, make a different app, make a different to-dos list, and put them anywhere you like, as and when you like. You're not bound by certain rules by the programming language. You create the rules. All right, so that's about extensibility. So all these coding practices that I talked about, like extendable code, unidirectional styling, all these code practices are essential for a scalable app. And when a web designer designs any kind of website, he cannot specify this in their design. They cannot specify this in their design, right? They have to. They're just going to make the visual outlook of the website, and that's when it comes down to the developer, the front end developer, to specify all of that, to make sure that it's going to be looking like that. It's scalable, and it's all of that stuff. So when it comes to designing itself, there are a lot of things important, such as color theory, thinking according to what the user wants or what a company wants to show to its users, where to be minimalistic and display less while telling more, and where you have to include like lots of essential information and just relay a lot of information. So I'm gonna go back to our app. once more. All right, we're back here. So let's talk a bit about, all right. So in this case, all right, so we have, let's talk a bit about color theory. We have, according to color theory, we have an analogous design. So what is an analogous design? It's where we use different shades of one color with, just one more color to give a contrast with and to design our app. So here, if anybody wants to take a guess at what our primary color is, you can put it in chat if you want. What do you think our primary color here is? White. Well, that's a good answer, but it is not, because here our primary color is actually going to be gray, because the background that so white here is only for contrast, and the primary color here is going to be gray because that's what the background and the text, and if you closely see the when I hover over the text, it turns to a shade of gray. So here our primary color is gray, and a darker shade of gray has more contrast with white. So it represents the tasks that have not been completed yet. So if I deselect, if I complete a task here, you see how it turns to a lighter shade of gray. So what it basically does is it focuses the user's attention from the tasks that have been done towards the tasks that have not been done. That's the thinking behind the concept of this page. So we have, that's why we have a darker shade of gray for those tasks that have not been completed, and a lighter shade of gray for those tasks that have been completed. All right, so the background, when we talk about the background is also very dark shade of gray, but that is because we want to heavily contrast the white here. We want to contrast our to-dos list, so we want to make that stand out. That's why we have our to-do list here essentially in white, but the primary color here is going to be gray. All right, so overall, when we talk about minimalism, the app is minimalistic, but essentially we don't have a lot of things in this app, so it makes sense. Why is it minimalistic? I don't see any way it cannot be minimalistic. But when we make any websites that have a lot of stuff, which have a lot of different stuff, and we start making minimalistic websites with that yeah, minimalism is something that a lot of companies are adopting recently. It's more like displaying more, telling more with displaying less. So we don't show a lot of information on the stuff. It's not overcrowding with text, images, videos, and all of that. It's just simple stuff that conveys the message in minimal display of information, because that goes easy on eyes too, and that's something that I want to learn about personally a little bit more. All right, so I think that's about it. And when we head back to the, all right, so yeah, we're back to the slide, and yep, analysis and plating. All right, so a few things that I have not included in this project. TLTD basically stands for too lazy to do. So I've not included CSS preprocessors like Sass. So what it helps you do is, make loops and all of those crazy stuff in in your HTML projects, and it helps you do a lot of very powerful animations and that kind of stuff to your website. So it's really good. And another thing that I've not included is CSS modules, which are like Bootstrap, and there are a couple more that new came out. I'm not sure which one, but from the top of my head, I just remember Bootstrap. So all these things are essentially used for bigger projects or where you have to compile a lot of stuff. And that's why it is important to include all of that in projects like those. But I have not done here because here the point of the project is to basically introduce you guys to React, right? So it's gonna not have all the complicated stuff. It's just gonna have simple stuff. That's about it. All right, so let's head on towards the conclusion. All right, so advertisements and selling has become really important in the world today. So it's like it's not about just a product now. It's about how to sell yourself, because if you want a career or if you want to work somewhere, you have to learn how to sell yourself. And before the internet, we had advertisement through like door-to-door salesmen, word of mouth. But after the internet, a lot of things changed, as you could provide your content and what you make to a greater number of people through the platform. And thus, that's why UI has become essential in that sense. All right, so UI simply has become important to meet user expectation and support the functionality of a website. And it turns potential visitors to buyers when we're talking about in advertisement terms. And React.js is not the only way to do it. There are so many frameworks out there that have different uses, like AngularJS, Vue.js. And the difference between is not just if they're based on TypeScript or JavaScript, but also the size of your web apps, functionality, and much more. So if you go into it, search on the internet, go into it a bit more deeply, you'll learn about how these different frameworks that are based on JavaScript are used to, make very modular, very powerful, and at the same time, very small in size websites. Because if a website is big, it's very big, then it's going to take a hell of time loading. And you don't want your visitors to just stay there at the loading page, do you? And there are several UI concepts that are missing from this project. So if anybody had to guess after looking at just having a glance at the code and everything, what would you guess was missing from our project? Yeah, sure. So the project that we just looked at, the to-do list, I showed you the code and how it finally looked like, right? But there were certain UI concepts that were missing from our project. Can you kind of take a guess as to what they could be? I did not include all of the concepts that should be in a perfect website or web app. Just take any guess. It's not really okay. There wasn't any text to put the to-dos in context, like a header. Definitely, there was no organization as such, because it was just a list, right? It was just a list of just tasks right there, and there's no like if we want to allocate like certain tasks to something, for example, if you're gonna be learning any course, then you have like 4 to-do tasks for that course, and then you want to learn something else, and there's going to be a different to-do list for that. So there was no to-do header as such. right? I think that's what Dan meant, right? All right. Anything else which you guys thought wasn't there? So, saving state in a database. Well, I'm not sure if that's going to be essential because, I mean, yeah, definitely a navbar. But talking about what Shana, as you said, saving state in a database, I'm not sure how that could potentially help UI. Maybe that's a functionality thing. Maybe you could do that as more of a functional thing, but I'm not sure if it helps UI in particular. Navbar, yeah, of course. For a proper complete website, we definitely need a navbar and the header and everything. But if you had a look at the code, you'll notice that the web app that I made, if I show you the code again, just give me 1 sec. All right, there you go. So if you look at the CSS files here, app.css and to-dos list.css, and basically just styles.css, do you guys notice something that is off here? Well, I'll let the cat out of the bag. Uh, okay. So for a clue, let me say that the CSS here, like, is super small. Like, there's not there's not a lot here, lot going on here. It's just basic stuff. And well, I think we're heading towards time, so I don't want to take a lot of time here. So I'm just gonna tell you what it is. It's basically, it's not responsive at all. So when we talk about responsiveness, it's important that, you know, anybody can view a website or any website or any web app through any kind of device. So whether it's a iPad, it's your mobile, or it's any of that stuff. So it has to be available to everybody. And that's why that's one thing that's missing from our web app that we kind of made here is responsiveness. And the second thing that you must have that is noticeable that it's missing is documentation. There's no comments as such as to what's happening, but that it's fine for a small project like this, but it's just a good habit to document what's going on, like what is which function is doing what stuff, and which element is responsible for what, which object is responsible for what. There's no documentation, there's no responsiveness. And as any project grows bigger, there's going to be a lot more UI concepts that come into play, some of which are like dead code elimination, which is code that's not really useful. It happens a lot in CSS. So there's code that overlaps each other and they're cutting off each other, and you don't see it because you see the website as you want to. Like, you see the website how it is presented, but there's a code behind the website that's basically interfering, and that's why the result is like that. So we have dead code elimination, we have isolation of components from each other. So we basically try to isolate different components in a React project or in any web dev project, and we isolate them from each other so that they don't interfere with each other. They don't overlap on each other. They don't look out of place, something like that. And then we have predictability of a component's behavior. So we should, like, when we are writing code, we should know that what is this component going to do, and when I include this component inside a bigger component, inside a parent component. How is it going to affect the parent component and what its behavior is going to be so that it does not modify the website when we build it. And then it's important to share constants between HTML, CSS, and JS, because these are like 3 different languages, and we need to share some constants here and there to keep things fixed. For example, if we are using JS to resize some certain component, we need to have a constant that talks about that this is the max width. This is the max width that it can have. So we need to share it with the CSS that this parent can only be this big. It cannot be any bigger. Otherwise, our website is going to break. And then minification of code, like basically writing, like for example, this happened to me on one of my projects. There was one developer that we were working with. He wrote 110 lines of code for doing one thing. And when me and my another friend, we looked at the code, we tried to come up with our own solution. We managed to do that in 7 lines, 7 or 8 lines. So that is something that's really important when it comes to bigger projects, because projects, if you have a ton of code that's doing something, and if you can just replace it with a smaller amount of code, that reduces the size of your website, which again helps just making it not heavy. The site is faster, the pages load faster, and stuff like that. And I think that's about it. So thanks a lot for taking some time to come here and listen to me. And I hope this workshop was really helpful to you guys. I'm just gonna put a message down here, which has a lot of stuff, that has the GitHub repository link and everything. So you can go through it if you want. Wait. All right, so this here is the GitHub repository. And this is the steps to run the code from the GitHub repository. So if you have any trouble, shoot me an email, or just you can find my email, I think, on just ping me on Discord. That's fine too. So this is a GitHub repository. These are the steps to run the code. And if you want to create a new React project by yourself, this is here again. And if you want like the first code that we did, the clean slate without anything, that's going to be this. All right, so I've put on several messages. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'm going to stay here for 10-15 minutes more. So just let me know if you guys have any questions, or we can discuss anything you want. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much. So this was awesome.
No worries. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we did.